Hello everybody, it's Randy Patrick here. Time for Housing Bubble 2.0 News of the Week, or as I like to call it, another episode of As the Housing Market Turns. Yes, it does kind of seem like a soap opera these days, I will admit that. Today is April the 9th. It is a Tuesday, and we got some stuff to talk about today. So today we're going to review the fact that rental rates are up. We're going to talk about 40 cities that may see a housing price decline in the next little while, and something that I think is very interesting, and I'm going to say that a housing crash signal just triggered, and kind of like the last time around. So we'll talk about those things today. So rental rates are up. So a report came out from a website called rentalcafe.com. Very interesting. I check it out from time to time. Talks a lot about what's going on in the nation, individual locations with respect to rental rates, etc. So very helpful. The national average rent across the board was up 3.2% year over year in March of 2019, so up a little bit. The average rent itself was $1,430 per month. And this basically what they said was 92% of the nation's largest 253 cities had a rent increase in March. So over 90% of them had a rent increase in March. 6% remained unchanged, and only 2% experienced rental rate decreases. So basically everything is moving up. Phoenix and Las Vegas dominated the report. Rent hikes, of all the rent hikes in larger cities, Jacksonville was a close third. So I'm going to go through that right now and just kind of give you some updates on that. And again, I know it's numbers and I'm talking to you on the video here, but just hear me out. So, they spot checked a couple cities, and Manhattan, for example, only saw a rental increase of 1.6%, but realized that the average Manhattan rent is $4,000 plus. It's a big number. LA was up 5.6%. And again, this is percent change year over year from March 2018 to March 2019. LA was 5.6% increase. Washington, D.C. was 2.3% increase. Seattle, Washington, 2.7% increase. Chicago, Illinois, 3.8% increase. Denver, 4.1% increase. Atlanta, 3.8% increase. Orlando, 3.9% increase. Austin, 4.9%. Tampa, 4.1% increase. Charlotte, 2.9%. Dallas, 3.9%. Houston, just shy of 1%. That's 0.9%. Fort Worth, 4.2%. Jacksonville was 6.3%. Las Vegas, these were the leaders. Las Vegas was 7.8% increase in rent. San Antonio, 3.7%. Phoenix, the co-leader at 7.8% rent increase. Columbus, Ohio, 3.6%. And Indianapolis, Indiana at 4.0%. So basically, we've got situations here, and that's kind of the list they had out there. If you talk about sort of what does this mean, what's it telling us? Well, to me, it just confirms the fact that buyers aren't maybe buying at the rate that they could be or should be, comparatively speaking. So landlords, if you're not buying a house or don't want to buy one and wait, and you have to force yourself to rent or lease for one more year, you're not going to the buyer fold. So again, the landlord may have to take the opportunity to raise your rate. And I think what's happening is that we've seen the past few months that we're not seeing as many home closings, sales are down, inventory is coming on, there's more choice. Buyers are still hesitant to pull the trigger. So what they're going to do is, instead of buying, they're going to remain renters, or they're going to look for other locations to rent. So landlords know that, they can play the game. So what the landlords will have now is better criteria of a renter, of a tenant, which is good for them, and maybe some more competition. So on the other hand, we had sort of the housing, we'll say affordability crisis going on, this past year, and lack of inventory forcing rates up and making it very competitive. Prices up, making it very competitive. Now we're starting to see on the flip side, rental rates are continuing to increase, and at the point where, could you be priced out of both markets? Who knows? Now, I know single family rental is a big thing, and there's more of that going on. A lot of hedge funds and other investors are buying up what they can, as long as they're purchasing them at good prices. We've seen the surgence of a ton of multifamily unit construction over the past couple of years. I know that many cities across the U.S. have, X number of what they call cranes in the sky, and some of them have tens of thousands of units that are actually under construction right now. So we'll see how this all plays out, maybe towards the middle or end of this year when all these things sort of come online. It'll be very interesting. But my point is right now, kind of you're stuck either way. Do you not want to pay the high prices and maybe want to wait to see where the market goes on a purchase side, but now you've got to rent still or continue to rent, and maybe you're stuck in a lease that's going to be it's high, or maybe you're renewing that's going to have an annual increase, or finding something new that now they've raised the rent. So it's a tough place to be in here. So there you go on that. Now there was a report that came out from GoBankingRates.com. They did a study, and this is the 40 cities that may see a housing price decline in the near future. So they actually did a study, and they evaluated a bunch of cities on multiple criteria. And that criteria was the percentage of homes in that city that had negative equity or were underwater. They looked at foreclosure rates. They looked at delinquency rates. They looked at homeowner vacancy rates. So how many homes are vacant in that city. They also looked at rental vacancy rates as well too. And they used this data to compile the study. Was based on information from the Census Bureau, Realty Track, and Zillow to complete the study. And they have a list of 40 locations. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to read that list for you right now, starting from number 40 and working our way up. So again, I'll take my time here. This is a numeric type situation, so we're going to go through it. So the 40th position home that we'll see or could see a price decline was Tulsa, Oklahoma. It has a negative equity of 10% and pretty much on average, or a little higher than average, foreclosure rates. And the foreclosure rates comparative across the country. Next is Bakersfield, California, 11.8% negative equity, about 2 times the foreclosure rate. Next up is Tallahassee, Florida, 11% negative equity, a little bit higher average foreclosure rate. Then we have Milwaukee, Wisconsin with 15.7% negative equity. Savannah, Georgia has 13.9% negative equity. They have a 3.2% vacancy rate and a 7% rental vacancy rate as well. Memphis, Tennessee, next at 13.4% negative equity and a higher than average foreclosure rate. You have Miami, the city of Miami, Florida, at around 10%, which I think it's a little higher, but depends on which study you're looking at here, I guess. And obviously their foreclosure rate is about double, a little more than double the national average, which I know to be true. Next we have Aurora, Illinois, 11.8% negative equity, and their third highest in the nation for foreclosure rate. So Aurora, Illinois, I'm not too sure where that is. It may be just outside Chicago area. All right, Lansing, Michigan, 16.9%. Foreclosure rate, a little higher than national average. New Orleans, 13.6% negative equity, 2 times the national rate with respect to foreclosures. Miami Beach, so they've segmented Miami out. Miami Beach is 14.5% negative equity. St. Louis, Missouri is 14.7% negative equity, about average for foreclosure rates. Jacksonville, Florida, 11.2% negative equity. Got a little Florida coming here, and they have a higher than average foreclosure rate, which I'm fully aware of. Mobile, Alabama, 11%, pretty much equity rate, and looks like national average as well on foreclosures. Little Rock, Arkansas, we got 11.5% negative equity, and we have higher than average rental vacancy rate at over 15%, which is pretty big here. Joliet, Illinois, 15.5% negative equity, and what they say is the worst foreclosure rate out of all the 40 cities that came out in the study. Syracuse, Illinois, 16.8%. Norfolk, Virginia, 20% neg-ec. Hampton, Virginia, 20% negative equity. Chicago, Illinois, 21% negative equity and very, very high foreclosure rates. Newport News, Virginia, 19% negative equity. Average, foreclosure rates. Rockford, Illinois, 21% negative equity. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 13% negative equity, and they have a pretty high foreclosure rate for the area as well too. Macon, Georgia, about 20% negative equity and 10% rental vacancies. Akron, Ohio, 20% negative equity, 7.1% rental vacancies. And what's the high rental vacancy stat mean? Do people just not want to live there? So there's not enough need for renting? I don't know. Or negative equity, does that mean other issues? So people that could be putting their homes out for rental can't afford to rent them because they are negative equity, so to speak, so it may not work. So who knows? Columbus, Georgia, 22%. New Haven, Connecticut, 20% negative equity and 3 times the delinquency rate. So we talk about foreclosure rates or foreclosure filings or foreclosure activity, such as actual sales. And then delinquency rates are people who have not been foreclosed on yet or foreclosure has been filed, but they are delinquent 30, 60, 90 days down. So they are 3 times the national delinquency rate. Toledo, Ohio is 24% negative equity, high foreclosure rate. Birmingham, Alabama, 26% negative equity, 9% rental vacancy rate. Columbia, South Carolina, 14% negative equity, and they have a high foreclosure rate. Montgomery, Alabama, 28%, a higher than average foreclosure rate. Dayton, Ohio, 27% negative equity. Fayetteville, North Carolina, 4% of homes are unoccupied, 26% negative equity rate. Now we get up to sort of the north part here, northeast and central or Midwest. Cleveland, Ohio, 26% negative equity. Second all-time, looks, I can't even read my own writing. I think they're second highest foreclosure rate out of the study. Paterson, New Jersey, 25% negative equity, 3 times national average delinquency rate. Hartford, Connecticut, 22% negative equity, 9% rental vacancy rate, and 3 times national delinquency rate. Baltimore, Maryland, 26% of negative equity, and the home vacancy rate is high and at 4.4%. Bridgeport, Connecticut, 27% negative equity, high foreclosure and high delinquency rates. Detroit, Michigan, 34% negative equity. So Detroit's always a city location that's having a hard time. And the number one location out of all these 40 was Newark, New Jersey at 28% negative equity, but they have also the highest, I guess you could say, highest foreclosure rate, higher vacancy rate, and 6 times the national average delinquency rate as well too. So a lot, excuse me, a lot of issues going on in Newark, New Jersey. Maybe a location you would want to possibly purchase in or do some investing in, etc. So, what does this kind of tell us here? Well, again, I like to look at things and kind of go, well, this is still, here we are in 2019, and we've talked about 40 locations that have problems. And what I mean by problems, they're at least 10% on the negative equity. So 10% or greater of mortgages have negative equity in that city. And then when we go through and look at, high vacancy rates, that maybe means people don't want to live there. High rental rates, it's hard, people don't want to rent there. And obviously higher foreclosure rates indicate other economic trouble. Higher delinquency rates, same thing, other economic issues going on in that location. So, this is 40 cities, and we're not talking about here like San Francisco, New York City, Los Angeles. We're talking about, Baltimore, Hartford, Columbia, South Carolina, Akron. So, a lot of cities that you would say are probably your average rank and file American cities. They're not the mega cities that are going to have the high swings with respect to housing price appreciation and depreciation. A lot of this is in the Northeast. A lot of this is in sort of Middle America, Midwest. So very interesting to see sort of what's going on here and the fact that it can happen anywhere. I think that's the point. So more and more, I'll just call them, no offense to anybody who lives in these cities, but average type cities, are making these kind of lists here, which shows that there's more problems that aren't just associated with the mega cities and those extremes that we sort of see back and forth. So that's the scoop on the 40 cities that may have a price decline. And again, when you look at all those criteria, and there's 4 or 5 criteria, it tees it up. It doesn't tee it up for a lot of appreciation, I guess is what I'm saying here. So that's the scoop on that one. Now, this I think is kind of interesting, my last topic here. And I'm calling this housing crash signal just triggers. So something that I saw and read that I think happened before, and this could be a major signal that's triggering the future housing crash. So again, if we go back 10 plus years ago, the last sort of housing crash crisis, there were a number of things, phenomenon, items that contributed to the crash, bubble bursting, crash, and crisis of the housing market. So I like to follow all of those items and see where we are in those situations because, I like to see how it's playing out this time around. But one of the main culprits that kind of pushed us into the housing crisis was what I call the cash out refinance, cash out refis. And many people blame the mortgage meltdown and the housing crisis on the subprime mortgages. And I want to acknowledge that yeah, that was a significant part of the last housing crisis. I think it started the housing crisis. It was a contributing factor, and it had, mortgage meltdown, all the issues, etc. It was a much publicized and much criticized segment of the housing crisis. However, that dealt with subprime mortgages, which were at that time about 20% of the overall mortgages that faced all those foreclosures. So we're being fair to subprime, and again, a significant role. And I tell you right now, subprime is back. It's playing another significant role. It's now called non-prime, and we're seeing a lot more non-prime mortgages being originated for the past couple of years and by what we call the non-banking sector, and they're going down with 3% down, higher debt-to-income ratios, more flexibility in criteria, lesser guidelines, less strict guidelines, etc. So we're seeing the resurgence of that as well too. But something else I really want to focus on is the cash-out refis here. So after the subprime mortgage crisis started everything off, the cash-out refis, I think, were the main issue. So people basically equity stripped. We heard the sort of comment or the saying that using your houses as ATMs, automatic teller machines. You'd go in, and take thousands of dollars out of your house. Now, the whole idea of cash-out refis or, maybe home equity lines of credits was the fact that you're using that money for home improvement to improve the value of your house. So when you did come to sell it, you've made these improvements, and the increase in value of the home offsets the dollar value that you pulled out of your home to make those improvements. That was the intention, but clearly that did not happen. So we know people took the money, went on spending sprees, bought cars, boats, big screen TVs, took trips, whatever they could, because the thought was, hey, it's going to go up 10% next year anyway, so I'm covered, and at minimum I'm going to break even if I have to sell my house. Well, no one ever contemplated the fact that the market would shift and go down, taking us back to the basic bubble theory 101, right? Fear of missing out. You want to keep going up and up, and you don't want to contemplate or think about if there's a change. Lord knows we want to talk about the negative aspects when we're in this great housing bubble. So that's typically what happens. So according to a recent study by Black Knight Financial, 82% of the refis in the fourth quarter of 2018 were cash out refis. So 82% of the originated refis were cash out. So people taking money out of their property. That's the greatest share since the 2006 peak. So the last time it was that much or more was back in 2006, just as we were hitting peak property values just before the housing crisis. So for me, that is my trigger going, okay, we are now going back in time and seeing what happened then and it's happening today. All right. Now, obviously, refis have been down the past couple of years, especially they said 1.7 million happened in 2018. That was the lowest amount of refi since 2015. Part of that is attributed to, I think, higher rates. We had a period of time where we had higher interest rates in 2018, so people aren't going to jump and refi and pay higher rates, of course. But also the fact that maybe people we know they're staying in their homes longer, and maybe they were possibly looking to sell and take equity out upon the sale as opposed to having to refi and remain there in the property. So we're not too sure about that. But the real interesting part about this study was the fact that I guess you could say that 2/3 of the cash out transactions in Q4 of 2018, the borrower actually raised their rate in order to access the equity in their home and take that as a cash. So what does that mean? Well, say you had a 3.5% mortgage, 30-year fixed mortgage that you were humming along with and everything is great. Well, you wanted to get at your cash, so you actually refied to maybe a 4.2%. So you took a higher rate than you currently had just to get out that cash component of your house. So to me, that possibly is indicative of a lot of other things that are on the go here. Is there debt issues that the people have? Do they just want to pull cash out for whatever reason? What does it tell us? Well, I mean, for me, I look at it going when things hit their peak, people either want to sell or they want to access that untapped equity source. So maybe they couldn't sell, or they past the point where they should have sold and thought, okay, as a consolation, I can't sell because things have leveled off. Maybe I'll go and take money out now. And again, this is just my own personal opinion, but I look at it going, if you have low inventory and you have, people competing for your properties, why not put it out and sell? Well, two things. You're going to sell it, that's great, but where are you going to go? Okay, so once you sell, you got to go someplace else. And if there still is low inventory and even higher interest rates, you're going to pay a premium anyway. So do you make that trigger that move or not? Or as a consolation prize, do we say, okay, well, I'm just going to stay in my home, but I'm going to maybe inch up my interest rate a little bit and take some cash out, and now I've got some play money either to improve my home or do some things, pay some debts, go on some trips, buy what you need to buy, whatever you want to do. That's the opportunity right there. So as far as I'm concerned, this is just like back in the day. So just, as we're peaking, and again, we talk about values. Okay, values are plateauing, so they've peaked. We're in the peak period, and people are taking money out. And realize this, though, too. When you get a mortgage, so when you buy a house with a purchase mortgage or you refinance with a mortgage, one of the criteria, one of the things that goes on in the mortgage process is the house/property gets appraised. So obviously the lender wants to understand what the value is of the home that you're taking money out of, and they want to know that debt to income ratio. You're typically, if you're taking so much money out, are you in line with the debt to income ratio they're going to allow based on your income, credit score, things like that. So that's kind of important. Now, realize that when you do appraisals don't necessarily reflect the current market right now. So today's market in March, early April 2019, we have X number of homes for sale. We have more inventory coming on, but all, these pending contracts, the homes for sale, those are future closings, which will be future, I guess you say, price notations that can be reviewed in the future. Appraisers have to go back in time to look for comparable or similar properties and look at those sale dates. So an appraiser can go back 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, whatever they need to do to justify the number to make it work. Not saying that that's the process, but I mean, they're looking back in time. So, what were sales like, in January, in December, in November? So, if we still had decent values, then they're pulling, okay, great, this is you want X number of dollars out of your property, your home's valued here, it was still strong, we're going to let you do that. So an appraisal really doesn't have much as far as forward-looking information. You're going to see a comment, there's a little section on typical appraisals where the appraiser does comment on future market, and I can basically tell you they're going to see plateau or they're going to see flat, small decreases or flat increases. They're going to say market should be comparable or should, we don't envision any issues in the next 3 months or 6 months. Well, that's going to be a mistake because there will be problems, there will be issues, values will slide, starting in the summertime or just after the summertime. So we're going to see that. But the point is you're taking your appraised value on, closings that happened a few months ago, and that's how you're determining value. So that's the scoop there. So for me, this is just one more signal or trigger that was present right before the last housing crisis that has kind of raised its ugly head right now. And of course, reading the articles and everything, so Black Knight Financial and other people suggest that we'll probably see more cash out refis going on early 2019 and possibly going farther because what? We know that properties are plateauing and rates have actually dropped down. So before, where people looks like they were taking a bit of a premium to get at the equity, you can maybe get at your equity now with not taking a premium, which would indicate that more people would possibly jump on board and do that. So if they can't sell or they see their property, they got to compete more with sellers, maybe I'll take my equity out and see what happens. So again, that's my opinion on that, but having seen this before, I think it definitely is a trigger, or it's a signal that's been triggered, that if we see more of this, I think it's one of many components that will lead us into a housing crisis and crash. And again, it's not just one thing. It typically is a number of things. There's probably 7 or 8, phenomenon that are going on right now or taking place that when they all converge, that's where we go, hey, we got some market issues, and we'll start seeing things drop a lot quicker than we have over the past little while. So that's the scoop, guys. So again, thank you very much for the views. Thank you for the comments and likes. Please share the video if you like what you hear and what we talk about. And again, if you're a new visitor, please subscribe. It certainly helps grow our channel and helps make my life a lot easier as well, too. So again, thank you for watching. And if you have questions, you can certainly email me. We'll get back to you as soon as I can. And we'll look forward to speaking with you later on this week. Thank you.